This video demonstrates how to use heat transfer vinyl bonded to a layer of fabric to create 3D applique effects. I've got a piece of white cotton and I've just ironed it. The vinyl then is designed that the shiny side goes up. This is a heat resistant shiny surface, and the back on this particular one is whited out so that the yellow won't show through to the other side of the fabric. So placing that on the piece of cotton, I've deliberately cut the cotton a little bit bigger so that I won't stick it to my ironing board. And then to make it easier to apply, I have a piece of baking parchment. So this is regular baking parchment. It's very important when attaching the vinyl to make sure that you're using a medium temperature. So most of the time, if you're working with an iron, a 2-dot setting is perfect. 3 is too hot, so that is somewhere between wool and silk. And if you go too hot, it all just melts, and if you don't go hot enough, it's not going to stick. So it's important to experiment with a small piece first. Depending on the size of the vinyl, press for about 1 minute or 1.5 minutes. Okay, so the instructions say once the colour changes, so generally these sort of bubbles indicate that it is probably ready. Take care, it's very hot. It's a good idea maybe to check on a corner. So if it's done, you'll notice that the plastic protective layer comes away quite easily. So I'm going to remove this layer here. This sheet is very, very sticky and you need to use quite a bit of tension to remove it. But I do want to go over it just one more time with the iron just to make sure that I haven't lifted any corners. Okay, so at this point it's very important that you're working through the baking parchment. First of all, I'm just going to trim away the excess fabric from the edges of the square. Now, so I've just finished cutting out the square of vinyl. So I'm going to turn the square over and I'm going to mark out all of the shapes. I'm going to mark the lines with a water-soluble marker. So this marker disappears once I spray some water on it or dab it with a wet cloth. So this is a Prim Aqua Trickmaster, but lots of brands do these. Most haberdashery stores have them. So lining the set square up with the edge of the square on the bottom and on the side here. This set square creates a 60-degree angled line, making sure that I can create multiple repeat patterns. By lining up 1, 2, 3, so lining up the 3 line on the first line that I've drawn, I can draw a line 3 centimeters away from the first line. Continue until you have all of these angled lines drawn. So for the next set of lines, I just need to work with the straight edge of the ruler and I'm going to square some lines across. So working with the number 3 line here again and drawing a line straight down. I'm very simply going to cut these out with a scissors. So starting on one side, now this is the base piece of fabric I'm going to work onto, and I'm going to work quite a geographical pattern. So I'm going to give myself a central vertical line to work towards. Now I've decided to crease all of the pieces because when I sew them down onto the fabric, I'm aiming for a 3D look. So I'm only going to stitch the center of the diamond shape. So if I give myself a crease line, I can stitch along that line. So I think that that will help when sewing the pieces in place. Okay, so I'm going to start with a vertical line and I'm going to place 1 pin. I'll probably sew from the center out, so it's okay to pin where I'll be sewing. Okay, so the next one will come from here. So I'm going to leave a slight gap between each Okay, so the shapes again are designed so that this piece here will fit fairly accurately in here. So they almost make a perfect square shape. Again, I need to crease the pieces. And the 6th. Okay, so I've now got 2 intersecting flowers. So I'm going to move down here with a 3rd. You can continue building the pattern out from the centre as with the previous sections. So this is the finished piece that I'm planning to sew, and again I'm just going to stitch a line down the centre of each piece. I'm working with a regular number 70 sized needle and I'm working with a regular foot. The machine doesn't like to start at the beginning of a heavy piece, so I normally start about 1/2 centimetre down and then work backwards. So lowering the needle by hand. Okay, and that'll give us a less jumpy start when I lower the needle by hand. Remember to reverse well at the end of each piece. Repeat the same procedure for each piece. Now this is the finished piece, so just to trim away all of the loose threads, the final step is just to get rid of the blue lines that I can still see from that very first line. So I'm going to work with water spray and lightly mist the fabric. So it's already pretty much gone there on the top and on the bottom. Okay, and because I had used the blue pen underneath the edges, it might be an idea just to double check and see if there's anywhere there that needs a little bit of a misting. Just maybe spray the cloth and then you can use your damp cloth just on the edges. That may be an easier way. Okay, so this is the finished piece. It has quite a nice papery feel and it's quite 3D. The pieces stand away quite a bit when moved around. And I think the appeal is in a piece of clothing then, when all of the pieces stand out in different directions. I think it has quite an appeal.